When we think about inventions, we usually see them as these neat, tidy solutions to problems. The wheel helps us move stuff. The light bulb? Well, it lets us see in the dark. It seems pretty simple, right? But what if I told you that's not even half the story? The truth is, every single invention, no matter how basic it seems, is this powerful force that reshapes our world in ways we almost never see coming. It creates winners, it creates losers, and it completely rewrites the rules of how we live. So let's pull back the curtain and uncover that hidden story.
All right, to get us started, let's chew on a big question. If you had to pick just one invention that made everything we call civilization possible, I'm talking cities, jobs, the whole shebang, what would it be? Just think about it for a second. The printing press, maybe? The wheel? How about writing?
Believe it or not, it's this. The plow. Yeah, a simple tool for turning over dirt. It almost feels too simple, doesn't it? But the single piece of technology is what allowed a tiny fraction of the population to grow enough food for everybody else. And that freed up all those other people to become builders, soldiers, priests, and kings. But here's the twist, and it's a huge one. It's a paradox. Because while the plow gave us all that extra food and let us build cities, it came at a pretty staggering cost. For the very first time in human history, it created massive inequality. You had rulers and you had the ruled. And even crazier, archaeologists can see it in the bones. Early farmers were way less healthy than the hunter-gatherers they replaced. Their diets were terrible, and they were hit hard by disease and malnutrition. In fact, this whole shift to agriculture was so brutal for human health and well-being that the historian Jared Diamond famously called it the worst mistake in the history of the human race. And that right there is the hidden story of the plow. It built civilization, sure, but it built it on the backs of a population that was sicker and more unequal. This sets up our whole theme today. Inventions aren't just solutions, they always create complicated, messy, new problems. So you see, every invention basically creates a whole new world. And in that new world, there are always very clear winners and very clear losers. Let's take a look at how technology creates something that economists call the superstar effect. Okay, so check this out. We've got two of the greatest singers of their eras. Back in 1801, Elizabeth Billington was the biggest opera star on the planet. She made an absolute fortune. But fast forward to 2015, and Elton John earned 100 times more than she did. 100 times. So, was he 100 times more talented? Of course not. The difference was one single invention, the gramophone. See, Billington could only perform for as many people as could cram into an opera house. But Elton John, he could sell his voice to millions of people all at once on a record.
And this is a perfect illustration of the superstar economy. It's a term from economist Sherwin Rosen, and it describes a market where technology lets the very, very best performers reach a massive audience. And because of that, they get to capture a gigantic share of all the money and attention, while pretty much everyone else gets left in the dust. The gramophone did it for music, satellite TV did it for sports, and today the internet is doing it for, well, almost everything. But here's the thing about technology. It never stops changing the rules. Way back in 2002, David Bowie made this incredible prediction. He said the internet would make music so easy to get that it would be like turning on a tap for water. And he was spot on. The very technology that creates one generation of superstar winners can turn right around and create the next generation of losers.
Okay, so inventions can change economies. But what if they could literally, physically, and sometimes violently redraw the map of the world? That brings us to the humble but shockingly brutal invention of barbed wire. The story is fantastic. There's this salesman, John Bedamillion Gates, and he goes to San Antonio and sets up a flimsy-looking corral made of his new wire. Then he has a herd of wild longhorn cattle driven right into it. The cattle charge, but the wire holds. And just like that, the orders started flooding in. So why was this such a big deal? Well, you have to put yourself in the shoes of settlers in the American West. The prairie had no trees for wooden fences. Planting a thornbush hedge would take years, and cattle would just lean on a smooth wire fence and walk right through it. Barbed wire was the very first invention that could cheaply and effectively carve up that huge open land. But let's go back to our main theme. One person's solution is always someone else's problem. The invention of the fence meant the end of the open range, and with it, the entire cowboy way of life. It triggered these violent conflicts called the fence-cutting wars, where masked gangs rode out at night tearing down the very wires that were chopping up their world. So barbed wire didn't just tame the West in a lot of ways. It tore it apart. All right, this brings us to our last and honestly, maybe the most important idea of all. The most powerful inventions aren't actually the physical objects themselves. They're the invisible systems that those objects make possible. So look at this number. Back in 1954, this is how much it cost, in today's money, just to load and unload a single ton of cargo from a ship crossing the Atlantic. It was slow, dangerous work done by big teams of dock workers. Today, moving that exact same ton costs less than $50. What made the difference? It was a simple metal box, the shipping container. Now, here is the absolute key. The box itself is useless. It's just a box. Its real power comes from the massive, invisible global system that was built around it. A standardized network of cranes, ships, trucks, and software that all speak the exact same language. The real invention wasn't the container. It was the system of containerization that completely remade global trade. You see the exact same pattern with the barcode. You know, we love the romantic story, the inventor on a beach, drawing lines in the sand, and having that aha moment. But the real story, the one that actually matters, is the years of mind-numbingly boring committee meetings in some motel where everyone had to agree on a single standard. Without that boring system of agreement, the barcode is just a bunch of meaningless stripes on a box. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that we need to start seeing the world a little differently. We need to look past the obvious function of an object and see the invisible web of connections it creates all around it. See, an invention is never just a thing. It's a single point in a huge, complex network. A plow isn't just for digging. It's a tool for creating inequality. A gramophone isn't just for listening to music. It's a machine that creates superstars. And a barcode isn't just for scanning groceries. It's the end result of a tedious, invisible system of human cooperation. So I want you to just look around you right now. The chair you're sitting on, the phone in your hand, that coffee mug on your desk, every single one of those objects has a hidden story. A story of winners and losers, of surprising consequences, and of the invisible systems that had to exist to bring it to you. The only question is, what stories are you missing?